51% contraction in the economy has come as a shock. There's one silver lining, and it's one that agricultural economist Wandile Sihlobo predicted could show some growth. The agriculture sector. The sector actually grew by over 15% in the second quarter. That's while the rest of the economy tanked. Well, Wandile, good afternoon to you. I would say there's some mystical, magical, economic reason for this growth, but you're just going to tell me it rained a lot, right?
It's part of that, Stephen, but I do think that the regulations also easing up and allowing the sector to operate in the first quarter in large part, that assisted. But fundamentally, Stephen, I think it rained a lot, people planted, so that really helped a great deal. But obviously, even if you look at various subsectors, Stephen, and say, what is it in agriculture that added there? Within that horticulture cluster, which was also a big part of that. We've had a good harvest in the citrus, deciduous fruits, and also within the field crops. I mean, the sugar industry saw a bit of a recovery, but most importantly, within the grain industry, second largest harvest in the history of the country, and also a nice recovery in livestock. So in overall, all subsectors of agriculture did well on the output perspective.
So grain's really important, maize, right? Because that has a huge impact on the rest of the economy and a huge impact on food prices.
Yeah, absolutely. That is important. And obviously on the food price story, which you are mentioning now, we've seen food prices remaining for a long time at relatively lower levels of around about just north of 4%. And we do think that for this year, we'll average in those levels. But the one important aspect, Stephen, which for this year we're not really going to see, because ideally when there are these bumper harvests, you would think that on the job side, on agriculture, we'll follow a similar path. But I think this year we will pretty much see that divergence because the lockdown regulations that were in place and also obviously the health protocols that followed that meant that now some of the seasonal labor which would have been brought in and really bring some vibrancy in those communities, that I doubt it happened this year.
I mean, obviously what you'd like to see going forward is that people, farmers, will take whatever profits they've made. I realize with the low food price they don't always make much of a profit, but they'll be able to reinvest that in farms for next season, and that means more people could be employed there. But of course, we are also at the mercy of the rains, and we don't know what will happen.
No, actually, Stephen, we're holding a more optimistic view. And I do think that they have been investing a little bit of that money on. Because if you look on what came out on Monday, Stephen, on a tractor sales, combined harvester sales, they were still solid at levels than the same month last year. And also just going back 5 months ago, farmers have been buying relatively more tractors than the year ago, which shows that this higher large harvest and also relatively good commodity prices have boosted their financial positions to a certain extent. And now going into next year, you can read that in two ways. There's confidence about continuing their business in the sector, but also the South African Weather Service came out on Friday last week, Stephen, saying there is a prospect of a bit of a La Nina, which means we could see, again, good rainfall in 2020-21 production season. So I do think that this is going to be a relatively good run for agriculture 2020 and also 2021.
With the lockdown and other countries having lockdowns as well, is there any scope for us to sort of increase our share in some markets? I know, for example, our wine exports were closed. That allowed other people to move into some of the markets that we used to supply wine to. Are we able to return the favour maybe in horticulture, citrus?
Yeah, I mean, that's an important part, Stephen, because you remember that we are an export-orientated agricultural sector. About half of what we produce in value terms goes to the export markets. So what I'm worried more about is not so much logistically, Stephen, on pushing those commodities, because we've seen really great volumes going out of the country. It was only glitches when there were COVID cases in some of our domestic ports here and there, but overall we've been able to keep exports going. But the one part that I'm worried about, Stephen, is the demand going into next year, particularly in the African continent. Because of those exports that we're sending out, which are roughly north of $10 billion a year, about 40% of that goes to the African continent. Now, I'm not sure what that demand in the African continent will hold. I do think that it will taper off to a certain extent, which means we need to grow our market share in some of the areas like India, China comes to mind.